Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Akki Hermit. Akki Hermit is a 4-mana mono-red commander. He's a 1/1 Goblin Shaman, and he says tap. He deals damage to target attacking creature equal to the number of untapped mountains you control. So I'm just going to get this out of the way right off the bat. Ben absolutely sucks. He's just a really bad commander when it comes to power level. However, when it comes to figuring out how to make this ability actually do something, this is quite the challenging puzzle to put together. Well, a couple of things here. Obviously, we need to have an attacking creature, and this is not really worth it if we're just shooting one of our opponent's attackers, so it's got to be one of our attackers that is somehow benefiting from dealing a bunch of damage to it, and that also means we need a bunch of mountains, and we specifically need those mountains to be untapped. So with that said, our primary payoff is going to be these cards, Brash Taunter and Stuffy Doll. So these are indestructible creatures that when we deal damage to them, they deal that much damage to one of our opponents. So the plan is get a whole bunch of mountains, deploy one of these two guys, attack with them, and then use Ben to target them and deal a ton of damage based on our mountains. Now, how many mountains can we realistically have in play though? Like, not that many. So it's going to be a matter of multiplying the amount of damage dealt. So we've got cards like Battle Mage's Bracers, Illusionist Bracers, and Rings of Brighthearth as ways of copying Ben's ability so that we can do these again. And then we also have a whole bunch of ways of multiplying the damage. So we've got cards like City on Fire, which triples the damage dealt to our opposing permanents and players, or Gratuitous Violence, which doubles that. Donna Noble, whenever it or a creature it's soul bonded with is dealt damage, Donna deals that much damage to target opponent. We've got a little nice combo here. So Fiend Lash is whenever the equipped creature is dealt damage, it deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. So this is a way of turning any of our creatures into essentially Brash Taunter or Stuffy Doll. But of course, if we're dealing damage to that creature, it's going to die. So we then need a way to make it indestructible, and that's where Eldrazi Monument comes into play. We also have some additional creatures like Mog Maniac, Screaming Nemesis, and Spiteful Sliver. These are, once again, creatures that have the same sort of Brash Taunter ability, but they do not inherently come with indestructible, which is why we need Eldrazi Monument. And then furthermore, we've got Sulfim and the new Twin Flame Tyrant as more ways of doubling up damage dealt to our opponents. Then down here, we've got Sword of Hearth and Home as a way to go grab more mountains out of our deck. And let me tell you, the ways of going and finding more mountains is pretty limited and pretty inefficient. So anything that we can get, we're going to play. We've got a little bit of card draw. In particular, Virtue of Courage works pretty well with our ability to damage our opponents. So this turns our burn into Impulse Draw. We've got some haste because we potentially want to be able to activate Ben immediately. And we potentially want to be able to attack with our creatures immediately, like Brash Taunter, for example. It would really suck if we have to play Ben, pass the turn, play Brash Taunter, and pass the turn. We want to be able to activate or attack as soon as possible, so these are ways of doing that. Pretty simplistic land base, with some artifact lands here to turn Mox Opal on, but otherwise mostly just basic mountains. A little bit of protection. Again, more ways of giving indestructible besides just Eldrazi Monument, so we've got Darksteel Plate and Hammer of Nazan. Some ramp, including as many ways as possible of finding mountains, so Bitterhorn, Nissa's Animus, Burnished Heart, Canoptic Wraith, Navigation Orb, Scampering Surveyor, Sword of the Animist, and Wayfarer's Bauble. Now, am I saying any of these cards are good? Well, mostly no. In fact, they're mostly bad. But these are the best we're going to get in terms of grabbing mountains out of our deck and putting them directly onto the battlefield. We've also skewed a lot of our ramp towards being creatures for two reasons. One is to combine with Professional Facebreaker, and another is so that these can be things that we can attach Fiend Lash to or just do other creature-related things so that we can burn our opponents out. We've got Goblin Welder and Goblin Engineer. These are, again, just ways of getting artifacts that we need into play pretty quickly. A little bit of removal in order to interact with opponents and get rid of stacks pieces that might be locking us, like Granite Magistrate, for example. Since we're in mono red, we can afford to run some things that mess with lands, in particular Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon, but From the Ashes and Ruination also work pretty well with our mana base, as does Winter Moon. Now, if you're not personally a fan of stacks, you can easily cut all of these cards, and the deck will basically function the same. A little bit of untapping so that we can activate Ben multiple times a turn, and then another card worth highlighting is Silverclad Ferocidon. So this is whenever it's dealt damage, each opponent sacrifices a permanent. Now, notably, it doesn't cause the opponent to sacrifice a number of permanents equal to the damage dealt. It's only per instance of damage. So you don't want to kill Silverclad, you just want to deal 1 to it, or at least less than its toughness multiple times, which we can do with Ben Ben selectively, since Ben Ben only deals damage equal to the number of untapped mountains we control. So we can just tap the mountains and then deal exactly the amount that we want to deal to Silverclad. And then if we've got ways of untapping Ben Ben, we can activate Ben Ben again to deal more damage to Silverclad to cause more edict effects. And then over here, there are some other creatures that also have an effect when you deal damage to them that I ultimately decided we didn't really need, because mainly just for space. Like, we already had Brash Taunter, Stuffy Doll, and like a few other cards, and so these just weren't ultimately necessary. But for example, if you, say, wanted to cut the stacks cards, you could easily shove these in here. There's also potentially some Mer Retriever loops that you could do, but I also decided that I didn't really want to do those in this deck, so ultimately wound up cutting those as well. And again, it must be stated that Ben Ben is just ultimately not very good. I would not consider this able to compete with other high power or especially CEDH decks, but if you're looking for something that just has a unique novelty factor to it, you could do worse than Ben Ben Akki Hermit. So with all that being said, that is going to do it for this commander in EDH.